Hello everyone. In this session, we will learn and explore data source. So, what is a data source? Primarily, a data source is a source system from where the data could either be read from or written into a database to perform various operations and validate the data. So, now let's explore adding a data source, and we'll also see what are the data sources which are supported by this DataOps tool and how can we create a JDBC connection. So in order to add a data source, we need to click on source tool. Under that, we will have to click on add data sources. Here we support different type of data sources like JDBC, files, generic and APIs. For JDBC type of data sources, you can work with Snowflake, Teradata, Salesforce, Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, and all other type of data sources that are listed under JDBC tab. For file type of data sources, you can work with Avro, CSV, JSON, XML, and all other different type of data sources that are listed under this files tab. And these files are supported for different locations such as files in shared folder, files in local server, files in HDFS location, file in GCS, that is Google Cloud Storage, files in ADLS, or even files in AWS S3 location as well. For generic type of data sources, here generic type is an added advantage. For example, let's say I'm using a JDBC type of source that are not supported there in JDBC, so we can use generic type connection option to connect with source database. Now let's learn how to add a new JDBC data source. So in order to start adding a data source, there are some prerequisites which you need to have, and they are the connection details like your database username, the password, and JDBC connections URL. By using those information, we can make connection between the data source and this tool so that we can read or write the data based on our requirements. So as of now, let's try to add a JDBC type of data source. Here, I'll go under this JDBC type. So in this case, I'm adding a new JDBC type of data sources, and I'll create a connection for Microsoft SQL Server. Here, if you click on Microsoft SQL Server option, you will get a bunch of options to fill out. So in display name, you need to fill the name of data source that you want to keep. For example, let's say I'm keeping Microsoft SQL Server demo, and the username we need to provide. So in this case, the username for me is this. I will copy it from my details. I'll paste it, and the same I will also do for my password, and so will I do for URL as well. Under JDBC URL, we will paste that URL. Now, if you see here, we have a different options here, SQL Server. So let's say if you are using SQL Server for JTDS, you can select this JTDS option, and according to that, you will have to provide the JDBC connection URL. In this case, I'm using for SQL Server, the core one. And that is the reason why I need to provide the different URL for SQL Server. Now I'm adding the URL for JDBC connection URL. Under this schema, we need to click on add schema option. If your username, password, and JDBC connection are correct, then you should be able to view the schema available under these connections details. So in this case, let's say I'm adding a DBO schema for now. So I'll click on add, and now we can test this connection, either this connection is made successfully or not. In order to test, click on test. Here at DataOps, a pop-up will pop out and will say data source tested successfully. It means that the connection which we are connecting, or the user details which we are providing, are correct, and the connections are done with our data source. So now we will click on save to save this data source, and we can further utilize it. After you click on save, you get an options called retrieve metadata. So retrieve metadata is something that when you have a daily basis data coming into your database and you want to keep this tool in sync with your newly added data. So so in that case, you can click on retrieve metadata. It will allow you to retrieve the new latest data that are updated in your data source. So if you see here, after adding this data source, you will be able to view the data source that you have just added, which is Microsoft SQL Server demo. And in this dashboard, we will be able to do some of the operations, such as, let's say, if you have hundreds of data sources created under this, so you can search by the name, or in order to check what kind of data source it is, you will be able to see from data source type. It says SQL Server. Who was the person who had updated it? It will show the my admin, and what was the time when it was updated. So the updated time it will show. In case if you want to edit these connections details, or let's say if you want to add a different schema also, so you can click on edit options, and from there you can go into schema. You can click on this plus icon. After clicking out, click on this space, and you can add as many schema as you want. So there is no restriction over adding one or two or three schemas. You can use multiple schema at a time. The same way we'll have to do on update. After clicking on update, we can again retrieve metadata as we have added a new schema, so that the tool will fetch the latest data also available under this CSS schema.